Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Kasper.
All right, let's talk some Brewers. So, Brandon, before we get into this Rocky series, I want to go back to the Mizz, to Mizorowski. First of all, pretty cool to see AmFam on a Wednesday 1 o'clock game be filled up. Tip of the cap to Brewers fans for doing that. But that matchup live up to the expectation. First of all, let's rewind it. Did you think it was getting a little too hyped up? Or, I mean, because you go to MLB.com, it looked like a boxing promo, Mizorowski versus Skeens. I mean, it kind of was like, to me, it was giving me flashbacks of Manning versus Brady. It was like a quarterback matchup where it's like, okay, the two pitchers aren't actually facing each other. You know, they're going up against the lineups. But did you feel like there was a little too much hype? And did it live up to the hype?
I was just more surprised how quickly it escalated.
Yeah.
Because once we kind of figured out, I think that was maybe during the weekend series of the Twins, that, okay, it's setting up to be Skeens versus Mizorowski, like, everything just kind of went from there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, next thing you know, you hear I think at one point, Brooks Schlesinger said they had sold an extra, was it 10 or 15,000
It's like standing room, I think.
Yeah, I think they were thinking it was going to be around 30,000-ish, maybe.
Yep.
Which is still, I mean, even for a day game, that's still a good amount.
Right.
And then just kind of, once people saw it, they said, okay, well, we got to go see this. I mean, the matchup itself, I mean, you know, Skeens went 4 innings, but, like, that's one of those things where, like, the reason he went 4 innings is because the Brewers really, you know, especially in that second inning, kind of, you know, racked up his pitch count.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, did it live up to expectations? Well, Brewers fans are probably kind of glad it didn't, because that means they kind of chased Paul Skeens early.
Right. And go ahead.
And with Mizorowski, I mean, he went 5 innings. I mean, that was one of those things where you'd heard kind of coming into it that, you know, the pitch count was around 80.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pitching on 4 days rest as opposed to 5, you know, previously. So, and he got through 5, and it was like mid-70s, whatever it was. So I think they just kind of figured, okay, this is close enough. Plus, having I think it was a 4-0 lead at that point. Like, you know, you understood it, and I'm sure there's people that probably wanted to see them guys pitch a little bit more, but still, like,
I think you take the win.
Right, and that's kind of the thing,
so.
too. I mean, if you would have said, hey, after 5 innings, you got a 4-0 lead, like, I think most Brewers fans have been pretty pleased with that, given, you know, Paul Skeens hasn't given up really anything this year.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, that second inning, it was kind of like small ball affair.
That was death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Right.
Like, and that's kind of, you know, fortunately for Skeens, it's kind of what he's been hit with. I mean, it's not often you have, like, a losing record and you have an ERA under 2.
Yeah.
Like, he just hasn't got much run support, and it just seems like that's the kind of stuff that's happened to him at times, where just, you know, defense can't make a play here, or someone just gets one through there. Like, you know, nothing was hit particularly hard.
Right.
But that's, you know, in that moment, that's, you know, that's kind of how you have to approach a guy like that, is, you know, not just trying to put the ball in play, but also just racking up the pitch count. I mean, that was a 30-some pitch inning, and that was a big reason he didn't hang around very long.
Right. You know, I think, you know, outside the win, obviously, the biggest thing that impressed me about Mizorowski in that start was just with all the fanfare and the hype leading up to it, the guy pitched, I mean, he seemed to handle it incredibly well for just his third career starts. And, you know, I know he mentioned it before. He's like, I just had to, you know, kind of tune out the internet and stuff. But for a 23-year-old, I thought he handled the moment incredibly well. I mean, he looked like a veteran.
Right. And he just, given the way the game started, you know, he walked the first batter, kind of looked like, okay, well, we'll see, because obviously there is wildness in his game. You know, maybe not as much as there used to be, but, you know.
And it was a tight zone to begin, too.
It was, you know, for both guys. It was kind of like one of those things where you're like, boy, is this home plate umpire really going to, you know, going to make it about them? But no, it ended up being fine. But just kind of the way he was kind of able to work through that early wildness, you know, to have 5 really strong innings where, you know, I know he went 6 hitless against the Twins, but I think you could argue in some ways maybe that was better, just because of, you know, he was pretty consistent around the zone. I think it was only 2 walks, if I remember correctly. You know, just you've seen so much in these first 3 starts of why he's as highly touted as he is. You know, to be that big, to throw that hard, but also, you know, kind of getting some swings and misses on his other stuff. I mean, everyone talks about the fastball and, you know, 102 miles an hour and all that, but, like,
a 94-mile-an-hour slider, for
right?
crying out
But
loud.
you know, getting some swings and misses on his curveball and his changeup, that's going to loom really large, because even if he throws those pitches 5 to 10% of the time, like, that's just something else you have to think of in the box. Like, you're going up there thinking fastball, slider, but in the back of your head, you're like, oh, but, you know, could this be in that bat where he throws a curveball up there? You know, and you can look pretty foolish when you're looking at 100 for 102 and, you know, 89 comes down.
Right. Yeah. So, but with Mizz, maybe I'm over exaggerating this a little bit, but I think it's something now as we approach the second half of the season. Is it going to be something now to kind of watch his pitch count? And because he hasn't gone over 100 innings, in his minor league career and such. I mean, the most has been in the 90s. So, is this something that you think that the Brewers are going to be mindful of going forward? Which right now they're in a playoff chase, and if he is your best pitcher, one of your best pitchers, you'd like to have him out there. But at the same time, you're looking at long term with this too.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that because you mentioned I forget the highest total, but you're right, it's somewhere in the 90s. So generally, teams aren't taking young pitchers from pitching 90 innings in a season to 180. Mm-hmm. So it's something they're going to be keeping a very close eye on, and. So as this year goes on, I think there's probably going to be some frustration from Brewers fans at some point where they're going to ask, well, why isn't he pitching deeper? Or, do they get a point where they kind of throttle him down? And maybe, if that pitching depth in the rotation kind of bears out like we think it might, if, this team gets a point of the year where they've got they've got their starters all healthy at the same time. Right. That, do they move him to the bullpen? But more so just out of kind of necessity of knowing, like, he's a big league pitcher. We want him in the big league staff, but, like, pitching 2 or 3 innings a week as opposed to, making 1 or 2 starts, like, might be a better way to limit the innings.
Yeah, but you forecasted it right there. There's going to be fans that are not going to be happy about 100%. That.
Yeah, but that's just kind of the reality of where we're at.
Right.
Like, that's how they're going to approach this. Mm-hmm. They're not going to go out there and have him suddenly throw 180 innings and throw double more than any innings he's thrown as a professional.
Would you? Yeah. Well, I was going to say, would you agree with Plesac, who said the other day he's the best Brewers pitching prospect already? 3 games into this thing?
Like, ever?
Yeah.
To me, I mean, the one I go back to is Ben Sheets. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ben Sheets had the pedigree. We famously know he pitched in the Olympics. Like, he came in with a lot of fanfare.
Yep.
I think the difference between the two, and it's not even really Sheets' fault, is just everything around it.
Right.
Like, Ben Sheets came in at a time when the Milwaukee Brewers had a new stadium, and that was kind of about it. Mm-hmm. You had some good players, but, like, I think there's just a much better infrastructure for Mizz now. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes a big difference. Like, the stuff-wise, like, obviously this is an era where there's going to be more kind of celebration, more hype around people. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could understand the argument.
Right.
I still think, there's something to be said for, kind of Ben Sheets early on. And
right.
But I can understand the argument. Mm-hmm. And he's someone that pitched for the Brewers. So, like, he has a pretty decent idea of kind of the history of the program. I guess I could say program, but of the franchise. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, so it's you can't ask for a better start to a career, I don't think, right now for the Mizz.
I mean, he's got as many hits allowed as wins.
Yeah, 3. I mean, that's ridiculous. So, and then after the Twins one? I mean, it was the first 11 innings of no hit ball to begin a career. So,
well, it's kind of one of the crazy things where it's like he won his first 3 starts. But he's not even the first Brewer this year to do that.
Yeah, Logan Henderson
did it earlier this year.
And we had somebody ask, the other day, Mizz great now, but, you look at what Logan Henderson did to begin the season. Why isn't Logan Henderson still on the team? And I think it's probably because Murphy kind of alluded to it. He had some injury history that they're being.
He did. And I think there's still some development there with him because he did it throwing primarily fastball changeup. And you can do that as a reliever. Mm-hmm. I mean, Trevor Hoffman famously made a Hall of Fame career out of throwing fastball changeup. But, like, as a starter, you need to kind of develop that third pitch, even if it's just a show-me pitch. Mm-hmm. A pitch you throw 10% of the time, if that. But they're just right now. It's a luxury they can afford. Mm-hmm. If this was a team that didn't have several other starters that were doing well, Logan Henderson would still be on this team. Mm-hmm. And I think you look at next year, barring an injury or something unforeseen, Logan Henderson will be in that rotation. Mm-hmm. It's just that right now you've got Jose Quintana, you've got Quinn Priester, who I know didn't have a great start Sunday, but overall the numbers have been good. Mm-hmm. You've got enough depth to where you can kind of be a little bit picky and allow guys a little more time to develop.
Mm-hmm. Right. So as we get to the second half of the season, because we're 81 in, we're
halfway point.
Yep, halfway point. When we look at this, are the questions that you have for this team maybe still the same that you had in the beginning half? Like, offense is playing better. Durbin and Ortiz are hitting. but I think we all know too. Okay, they're probably going to come down to earth a little bit. Is it still offense? Is it still power bat? Now, I mean, Garrett Mitchell's suffering a setback too. Does center field or an outfielder potentially, move up on the priority list by the trade deadline and such? What are some of the main questions that you kind of have with this team heading into the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still gonna kind of have questions about that infield, especially like third base. Like we've had the conversation, I think it was last week, about kind of Ortiz versus Durbin and kind of what they're bringing to the table. And again, like you said, they're both hitting better now. They're both playing good defense. So, like, it's not as much of an issue, but still, like, this team is an injury away from having Andrew Monasterio either at shortstop or third base play a bunch. And that's just no disrespect to him, but he's just more a better reserve than a guy that's playing every day.
Right.
And, they've kind of been looking into that with, some of the guys they got playing at AAA. Bobby Dolbeck's playing really well. He's kind of a former big prospect elsewhere that's kind of traveled a little bit. He can play third base. Like Anthony Siegler is a guy that's been doing really well for them at AAA. So it's like they could go that option if they want to, but still, it's like you still like to have somebody else too. Mm-hmm. I had seen kind of the conversation about a guy like Jamer Candelario, who got released by the Reds, who's not that far removed from playing a really good third base, hitting well there. It's like, well, the Brewers take a shot at him. It's like, well, I guess maybe, but there's probably a lot of teams thinking that way too.
Right.
And you mentioned the outfield. The good news is
Perkins got elevated to
Blake
AAA.
Perkins is moving up to AAA now in his rehab start. So, I mean, obviously that's kind of the last step for him in coming back, and that would be a big get. No disrespect to Das Cameron, but Blake Perkins is a better player.
Right.
Like that's just the truth.
Defensively, he's a way better player.
That's just the facts. And,
right.
That would to get him back as kind of that fourth outfielder would be really, really big. Mm-hmm. And especially defensively, because we all know what he can do defensively. But as a capable bat as well. But that's going to be the question going into the trade deadline. Like, if this team is in striking distance, you feel like it's going to try to do something, and it's offense somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's maybe a reliever. I guess it feels like the Brewers could always add a reliever,
add a bullpen. Yeah.
Starters, we'll see what it looks like then. But if they get healthy there, like, you kind of feel like, okay, they have a pretty decent group there of guys that you could deploy out there. So it's just going to be, I think, a matter of where they're at those spots.
It feels like too. I mean, the I don't know if it's kind of an awkward or just bad timing situation, but I mean, Nestor Cortez just feels like that is a guy that they could trade, but he's been hurt for so long. How much could you get in return? And he's supposed to be after the All-Star break and such. So it's that weird timing. Situation.
Yeah, that's just one where I don't think you're going to be able to do that. I think you're just going to get, you just hope you get him back and he can be productive.
Right.
Like, that's kind of all you're hoping for at that point. Mm-hmm. And Robert Gasser, I think just because of the numbers, they may afford to be a little bit conservative with him. Mm-hmm. Because remember, he pitched in the big leagues last year, but he didn't pitch very much.
Right.
He pitched a handful of starts. So he's a guy that maybe you use this year because you have the depth as, okay, we're going to ramp you up slow, but we're going to make sure you're pitching in AAA by the end of the year. And then you can kind of have a full off season, and then 2026 is really when you have that shot to, jump into the rotation.
I'm glad you mentioned Robert Gasser, because we had Big Worm saying if Woody doesn't work out, we also have Gasser waiting in the weeds. He pitched phenomenal last year until his Tommy John. What do you think? Let's go all in, darn it. But I guess I'm operating on the assumption Gasser's not going to pitch at the big leagues this year.
I mean, he could, but I just think that, again, assuming all things being equal and that they're not, it's not a need because of injury, you just can afford to take it a little bit slower with him.
Right.
Because you still know that some combination of your five is going to be pretty good.
Right. I mean, would it? Because you still have Logan Henderson though too, right? I mean, him as an option to come up as well. So I feel like they would. You had the luxury, if you want to say, to be patient with him.
Someone we're not really talking about that is actually pitched.
Tobias Myers.
I was going to say someone that's actually pitching pretty well in AAA right now.
Yeah.
Tobias Myers.
I think because I was just looking him up yesterday. His last two starts. 0.00 ERA. So
can't do much better than that.
Right. And that's a guy who pitched in big games last year.
Right. Remember, he pitched so well in game 3 of the wild card round. So, and just had a really good year. So, like, you just have this group of pitchers, and it's just like, okay, well, how is this going to work out? Well, we'll see. But if you have a good group you can pull from, I mean, you're already ahead of the game.
Right. I just, I think one of the biggest questions that Brewers fans are going to have, because now they've put the team has put themselves in this position. They're 3 games back from the Cubs. They're second in the wild card race right now in this deep National League. I think one of the biggest questions fans are going to have, and maybe it's going to end up being a grind my gears, is are they going to make a move or not? Are they going to make a move that moves the needle?
Right, as opposed to kind of trying to add on the margins.
Right.
Like how serious are you taking this? And again, that's a little more than a month away, so there's a lot that can change then.
Right.
But right now it's looking like in essential a 3-team race. I mean, the Reds are still right there too, but it's going to be a bit of an arms race. We know the Cubs are probably going to be looking to add a starter.
Yeah.
Maybe they might add a third baseman. So they're,
Yeah, there's quite a few teams that could use a third baseman outside of the Brewers.
So if you've got one, if you're the Diamondbacks and you got Eugenio Suarez, and
they're only a couple games out of the wild
that's
card
it right
too,
now. They're still in it, but given the injuries to Corbin Burns and now Corbin Carroll, and whatever, like it could almost be an opportunistic seller, even though they really made an effort to kind of beef up their payroll and stuff. So they probably don't want to be a seller, but you might have to look at the market and say, look, we don't want to, but this is a market where we have to. And Eugenio Suarez would be a third baseman that would help anybody. I mean, he's a big power bat. Like that's a guy you could park in the middle of a lot of orders, and he'd be a difference maker.
So you're saying you would love that for the Brewers? Too,
I would not mind that. I would not mind that for the Brewers. I mean, but they're going to have a lot of competition for his services if the Diamondbacks decide to go that way.
Do you know if he's still under contract? Control?
I think he's a free agent after this year.
Okay, all right. So I was just kind of curious, but
which I think in some ways like. That's not a bad thing for the Brewers.
A little bit cheaper, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, yes. But also, I mean, again, you're going to have a lot of people after him. But, it would just be like, I'm just trying to think realistically. Like, that's, I think, a realistic target.
And I know, we've talked about him before, but, I mean, Brewers fans are going to see him, and this weekend, too, is from the Rockies, who I feel like has been, a trade.
Brian McMahon.
Yeah, a trade guy for the last couple of years. So, I mean, is that another option as maybe the second kind of third baseman, second-tier third baseman potentially available?
Potentially. I mean, I'm not as in on Ryan McMahon as others are, just because his career splits away from Coors Field are pretty bad. Yeah. And, Eugenio Suarez is a free agent after this year. But, and McMahon was still, I believe he's still under contract for next year as well. So, I mean, he's someone that's been connected to a lot of teams too, plays really good defense, a left-handed bat, has some power, but, he's just one of those guys I haven't been as enamored with as, some other people seem to be, just because his numbers away from a very hitter-friendly ballpark worry me.
You're right, because I'm looking at his splits right now for just this year. Home, he's a 270 hitter with an 8.888 OPS. I mean, okay. But away, 180 and a 583.
Right.
I mean,
it's kind of similar throughout his career. I looked up. It was either yesterday or the day before. Like his OPS away from home for his career is like 650 or 660. So it's below average.
Yeah.
Like well below average.
Right. So
I mean, that's essentially what Caleb Durbin is doing for the season right now.
Yeah. Well, maybe if he hits a couple home runs at AmFam Field this weekend, it might change.
There we go. He can help his own cause. Although, given and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, more when we talk about the Rockies series, but given the Rockies and the way they operate, you cannot depend on the Colorado Rockies to do the smart thing.
Right. Brewers, Rockies. By the way, Brandon, I would like to go back to the tape from last Friday's show when you said you were going to get a hold of me at the game on Saturday, and I bought a beer for you, and I had to drink it because you never got a hold of me. So
I'm sure you were crushed.
I was.
Actually, I was on the same side of the field as you.
Yeah. So, dude,
it was hot.
It was hot.
We had a little
breeze,
steps.
but yeah. But that was the first time I've ever been to Target Field, so it was really cool. It was really cool. So, but did you go to Canterbury?
No, the horse racing was canceled because of the weather.
Because of the weather? Okay.
So
I didn't even think of that.
We found other activities to do, but it was still a fun day. Yeah, that was a bit of a bummer, but understood. It wasn't surprising.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but yep. So, but Brewers Rockies, I call this series, Brandon, you better win series. Not a must win, but a you better win. Rockies stink. They're coming to your town. You're playing really good ball. There's no reason you shouldn't at least win 2 out of 3 in this series.
Right. I think that's the place you start. I mean, it's kind of a similar thing with the Pirates.
Yeah.
And obviously, after Monday, I think it was like, uh-oh. And then,
I know. I was
thankfully,
worried.
they came back to take 2 or 3. But, right. And with this Rocky series, I mean, the 3 pitchers the Rockies would be throwing, like, pretty sure that those are all three pitchers that pitched when they've been there a long time.
Yeah.
Kyle Freeland tonight, Antonio Sensatella tomorrow, German Marquez Sunday. Like I want to double check this because I'm pretty sure all three of them pitched for the Rockies in 2018 when they played in the NLDS.
Oh, no kidding.
Like those guys, I believe they've all been there a long time.
Okay.
And I'm going to double check this because it's just a stupid thing that'll bother me. But I mean, those are veterans. Like especially the last two aren't pitching particularly well, so you kind of hope.
They got to be like some of the longest tenured Rockies, I would imagine, too.
The thing about the Rockies too is with that ownership group, like they will kind of hold on to some guys even if those guys aren't necessarily good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They just, I mean, with that ownership group, it's one of those things where it's like, obviously we can be frustrated with Mark Anasio and stuff, and rightfully call him to task for things, but it's one of those things where there's just so many other owners that are worse.
Yeah.
That he's almost better just by the process of elimination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But,
I mean, for crying out loud, I know he's been banged up and such too, but it's like Chris Bryant. It's like you don't hear about him anymore.
That's the sunk cost at this point. And I was right. All three of them pitched, and they actually Marquez and Freeland were two of their most valuable pitchers in 2018 when they lost to the Brewers in the wild card round.
Interesting.
And Sensatella was there too. So
interesting. Good nugget. So, but yeah, I mean, you look at it's Quintana. You look at, Quinn Priester, Chad Patrick, maybe a bounce back type of game here. But, I mean, I look at this as like you better at least take 2 out of 3.
And honestly, I like the way this sets up for the rotation for this series because I also like the way it sets up for the Mets series.
Because you're going to get Peralta, Mizorowski, and Quintana.
And those are, I mean, right now, if you were saying, like, okay, which 3 Brewers pitchers do you want to pitch in a pretty important series? Mm-hmm. And that's just an important series because obviously the Mets are a really good team playing really well. But, like, it would probably be those 3 guys.
Right. So I'm trying to do my math, and at least 2 of those 3 would play in the Dodgers series then, too.
I think so. I mean, looking ahead at the, and I just had it up, at like ESPN's kind of their probable pitching schedule. Mm-hmm. I thought it was like, for that Dodgers series, which is a week from Monday,
right,
would be Mizorowski, Quintana, Priester.
Right. Yeah, because Peralta would get the final game against Miami.
Yeah, so...
Unless they,
I don't think they would. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit tougher when you don't got an off day in there to work with. Like, It's weird because the Brewers have 2 off days around this Rocky series. They're off yesterday and they're off Monday.
Yeah,
and then they're not off again until after the Dodgers series on July 10th.
Yep, and then it's the All-Star break.
And then so it's always interesting how days off and stuff work for for over the course of a year. How you can go like 2 or 3 weeks without having one, and then you'll have like two in like 5 days.
Well, then it's the really kind of, I don't know if we want to call it like a weird one, but to look far ahead, September, like Labor Day, they play the Phillies on Monday, off day, then they play the Phillies again.
Oh yeah, and I think that's because they're playing on Labor Day, and then they mix in that like having it Tuesday instead of like Thursday.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it is. But
that's just
that's almost kind of like the opening day thing. Hey, let's have opening day on Wednesday, and then not play Thursday, and then
it's just
pick
kind
up
of
Friday.
One of those. It's how the cookie crumbles things.
Mm-hmm. So, I would expect nothing less than at least 2 out of 3 in this one. I don't know. If
how much. Not, you're gonna, we're gonna be talking about like, okay, that was a missed opportunity.
Yes. Yep.
And they gained a little ground this week with the Cubs and the Cardinals splitting.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going to. You look at if we do a little scoreboard watching. I mean, Cubs are going up against the Astros, so I mean, there's an opportunity there. Astros are playing well; they're a playoff team right now. The Cardinals, they're going up against the Guardians, so I mean, Guardians have something to play for here. So
yeah, obviously a couple. Those are no tin cans there,
right? And I think the Reds are going up against the Padres, so, potential to maybe move a little up and increase a little bit of a gap,
right?
Possibly. So.
But, 2 out of 3 would be good. A sweep would be nice, but, that's...
Playing the averages a little bit.
Right,
so.
and, I mean, that's not easy to do no matter how poor, another team might be playing. It's baseball. You never know.
Right. So, I look at this as a potential, we call it moving day, to use a little golf term. Moving weekend.
Moving weekend, yeah.
For the Crew. And then if they win this series against the Rockies, and for the month of June that we've talked so much about, I call it a successful June.
Right.
Yes, it was a little bit of a downer with the Padres series because you had opportunities. Braves, you dropped that series. But for the most part, you look at it overall, I think you probably take that.
Right.
When you would count the Phillies series, I know it was just one game in June, but still count the Phillies series in there. I think that would be a very successful. And considering not just from a win standpoint, but the way their offense played in the month of June too. I mean, I would call it a successful month,
yes.
for sure. So, and it's going to be interesting too with this. If they get closer to the Cubs, Brandon. I mean, they only play them 2 more times,
right? And that's near the end of the. No, that's
end of
that's
July.
Sorry, that's the Cardinals.
Yeah,
that was the Cardinals. I was thinking of they only play them twice more, and it's like right at the end of the year.
Yeah. It's in September, and then Cubs are the final week or the final series in July, so that final week there. And then it's the 5 games in 4 days in August.
Right. And the interesting thing with the Cardinals, I believe 3 of their last 4 series, 9 of their last 12 are against the Cubs and the Brewers.
Ooh, okay.
So if they're if they're still lingering at that point, obviously they're going to have that opportunity to kind of make moves.
Mm-hmm. Right. I was thinking about one third baseman that I think everybody thought was going to get traded in the offseason and hasn't, was Arenado, and I don't think the Cardinals will at this point.
No,
but you just kind of wondering.
Yeah, as long as they're still contending.
Right. But, that was, I think everybody just assumed it was going to happen at some point.
I mean, I think there was the rumor that he had turned down a trade to the Astros.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, did I see benches cleared after that Cardinals-Cubs game yesterday?
I think there was some hubbub. Shocker. Wilson Contreras was involved.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think he got hit by a pitch, which I'm not going to be one to defend the Cubs here, but they weren't going to hit him to bring the tying run to the plate in the 9th inning. They didn't throw at him on purpose. And
yeah,
just when you crowd the plate,
mm-hmm.
And you kind of when your swing path always brings your body towards the plate, you're going to get hit.
Mm-hmm.
It's. Yeah,
and that was against his former team.
I think this is a rare thing that Cubs fans and Brewers fans just kind of look at each other and go, "We know."
Yeah, we know. We get it. So yeah, that was after the final out too, because the relief pitcher was pounding his chest or something.
Yeah.
Contreras got offended and took a few steps, and sort of thing. But that's.
I think that's just one of those things that when you're the Brewers fan and you're watching that happen with the Cubs and Cardinals, you're just going fight.
Yeah, because then people get suspended and miss games.
You're just trying to be the instigator in that point,
mm-hmm.
the third-party instigator.
Yep, totally agree. There could be, and I'm gonna plead ignorance on this. I don't know, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. Pump the brakes, full throttle. There should be a push to get Mizz in the All-Star game. Now I don't know if he's eligible.
I'm still gonna pump the brakes on that because he's gonna make 2 more starts,
2 or 3 more starts before the All-Star. I think it's. Mets, Dodgers, it's close. Probably 2.
I'm going to pump the brakes still.
Okay.
I just, as cool as that would be to see a guy, but still, it would be 5 starts.
Mm-hmm.
They could be great.
Should Major League Baseball push it, though?
No.
Because then you could go, but Brandon, you could go like this. Paul Skeen starts Mizz right after.
Or they could do this. They could just push Jacob Mizz anyway and draw people to watch Brewers games. They could actually highlight and continue to highlight, because they did on Wednesday, but they could
mm-hmm.
continue to highlight a small market team. I know that's crazy, but they could do it.
But will they?
We'll
pump the brakes on that one, probably.
Will they pump the brakes on that one?
I think it would be cool, but I'll pump the brakes on it. The difference is Skeen started his career earlier last year.
He did.
He got the start in the All-Star game, but he started off a little bit earlier.
Right.
I mean, nobody's really talking about it, but let's say Mizz goes 5-0 and he only has allowed 5 total hits leading into the All-Star break.
As crazy as it is, it's not impossible.
Right. I don't know then if that would actually where you get a little bit more talk with that, but yeah, I'll pump the brakes on that one. I feel like, okay, pump the brakes full throttle. Freddie Peralta is the most likely All-Star player for the Brewers.
Yeah. I mean, he's done well. I think that Trevor McGill could be in that mix as well. I mean,
Uribe, he leads and holds.
He could. It's always just so tough to get a non-closer reliever into the All-Star. That bar is so high.
Unless you're a long relief kind of guy like Andrew Miller was.
Or if you're a really, really good pitcher on a bad team. And you're like, well, we need a guy.
Yeah.
Let's take that guy. It's something that doesn't really get picked a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, looking around, it's like.
Freelick should, but he won't. I mean, he doesn't have the power numbers. Let's be real. It's with that. So, but let me ask: is Yelich making a late case? Top 10 in RBIs.
He'd have to keep up this for another week or 2,
mm-hmm.
which could.
Because Dave Roberts is going to be picking the rest of the stuff, right?
I mean, so maybe. I mean, but it'd be one of those if you made it, okay, but I still think he needs another week of being hot.
Mm-hmm. I still look at that overall season numbers-wise, and it's still a little...
Yeah, the overall, like, obviously he's been fantastic for the last, month, whatever the line of demarcation is, but...
Mm-hmm. Pump the brakes, full throttle. When it's all said and done, Christian Yelich will retire as a Brewer.
Yeah. I'm gonna say full throttle on that, because he's got another... Is it
I think it's a couple of years left.
Oh, it's like another 3 years yet. Like, and he's a guy that, like, I don't get the vibe that, like, he's going to be one of the guys that plays till he's, like, in his 40s.
Yeah.
He'll be coming to the end of a big contract. Remember, he's still going to be getting deferrals in there too. So
yeah,
he'll be taken care of.
Yep.
Like I'll go full throttle on that. Yeah, he's after this year, he's got 3 more years through 2028. That's his age 36 season.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a mutual option in 2029, his age 37 season. Mutual options just generally aren't picked up.
Yeah.
And then starting in 2031, he'll be getting $2.3 million for the next like 11 years.
Not a bad way to earn a living.
No.
Whether he's playing baseball or not. So
right. So I don't know. I could see him when he's done just saying it's, you know what, that's good.
Yeah. Which would be kind of weird that we have a Brewer who signed a long-term deal that might finish it out.
Yeah.
Play it out. Because Braun didn't play out his. I think he retired early before it all, or was he a free agent?
I think he might. Let me check and see.
Okay. I can't remember if he was or not. So
I'll double check on that.
Pump the brakes, full throttle. The Brewers right now should be working on a contract for Jacob Mizz, a la the Freddie Peralta deal.
Whew. I'm sure it's already been in their head.
Or I guess I could throw in the Aaron Ashby, because they did the same kind of with Aaron Ashby.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's already in their head, but like it's just.
Are you slightly tapping the gas pedal?
I'm slightly tapping the gas pedal. I'm lurching out into the intersection.
You're kind of like a yield approach and still going through?
I kind of a yield approach. I'm looking around. Like, I don't see anybody else. It's like a 4-way. I'm just going to like 4-way yield. I'm like, I'm not seeing anybody. But you still want to make sure. But like,
right.
I'm sure they are. The question is obviously, it's going to take 2 to tango for him on his side. Like,
that's the thing too. Is like, okay, this would be an interesting conversation for me to just listen to. It would be, okay, you're Mizz. Obviously, we know the potential and the hype and all that. You play it out, you're going to earn some big bucks. However, you do throw hard. There's going to be some talk about like, elbow injury, shoulder.
Being that big, that lanky. Like, it's something I ever thought about. Like, that's inevitably at some point this could happen.
Right. So do you want the security now in case that happens?
Right.
Or do you bet on yourself where
and
you could potentially win more?
It's the big play of like, getting it, guarantee versus future upside.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'm going to go back to Big Worm. He had a question since it's still Brewers. This was a little bit earlier, so I'm not sure if he's still listening. But talking about like the trade deadline, let's go get some bats. Agree or disagree that the last time we went all in was the CC Sabathia year? Pump the brakes, full throttle. Was that the last time the Brewers went all in? So I wanted to save this and ask you, our Brewers expert.
No, here's the thing. Offensively, I guess not even offensively. I don't know, because I would say 2011, because they traded for Greinke, they traded for Markham.
Yep.
That was Prince Fielder's last year.
Yep. In
Milwaukee. So that I would say 2011, like 2018, like even after they lost Game 7 to the Dodgers, I didn't have the feeling like, oh my gosh, they're never going to contend again. Like 2011, you knew it was the end of a window.
Yeah. But even 18, that's when they acquired Moustakas.
They acquired Moustakas.
Was that the Jonathan Scope year too that they got?
Yes.
Okay.
It didn't work out, but it was a big move. They got Gio Gonzalez, like Curtis Granderson.
Yep.
Like, so it's just kind of nothing. It's going to be so hard to ever top the Sabathia trade because of where the Brewers were at that point. Because that was we're trying to get over the hump.
Yeah.
And really, they've been over the hump for the most part since then, especially since 2017, 2018. So, and that was such a big deal because it was the move to get them over the hump. It kind of set the tone for things in the future years where they didn't necessarily have to do that because they already did it. You didn't have to go over the hump again if you're already over the hump.
So it almost, I feel like, depends on how do you define going all in.
Right.
Because I feel like that 08, even when they acquired CC, did we feel like they were going to win a World Series that year?
Probably not.
Because I agree with you. Like, I was a part of that family. I was like, that was our first time. We were just happy to be there.
Like, the thing was just make the playoffs.
Right.
Because they had made the playoffs in 26 years.
Right. Where 2011 was like, hey, there's championship goals here now.
Do it.
Right.
Go,
and when we won Game 5 and we found out the Phillies, who were the top seed, were out and we had home field, we're like, I started looking at World Series tickets.
Yeah, I was like, hey, Cardinals, I'm not worried about the Cardinals.
Right.
I was dumb.
Yeah, exactly. That's like, I remember we were in the parking lot after Game 5 and found out, I'm like, oh, dude. And I remember going out to eat I was living in Rapids at that time, and one of the workers at the bar that was a big Brewers fan, we were talking, like, looking at World Series tickets. Like, all right, we're going.
Right.
Didn't help we won Game 1 of that series either against the Cardinals, so...
Yeah, I mean, I remember that. Winning Game 1 against the Cardinals, just like sitting there thinking, like, wow, the Brewers are 3 games from the World Series.
Yeah.
That it just blew my mind. And obviously, they only got they only won one more game in that series. But like, I would say 2011 would be the last. Like, that's the last time I would legitimately say that they kind of went quote unquote all in because of Greinke and Markham and knowing it was Fielders last year.
Yeah, I remember when we found out about that Greinke trade. Now, how much would you factor in the two? Because I mean, remember before 2018 when they acquired Yelich and they signed Lorenzo Cain. That's
a good point too. Like when you say going all in, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a trade deadline move,
right?
Like that, because remember the year before they were eliminated the second to last day of the season. Like they were right there. And, that was kind of a year where they were kind of hanging around. And I don't think people expected them to.
Right.
So that was, I think, kind of the year they said, okay, we're pretty close here. So maybe I could see making the case for that too, where trading for Yelich and acquiring Cain, like they're going for it.
Because what was the reaction after that happened? I mean, people were like, "Oh, World Series goal for that year."
They're going for it.
Yeah, they're going for it. And remember who they traded for Yelich was like
it was
Lewis Brinson.
But like it was a pretty decent prospect haul. Right. Now it looks better in hindsight because none of those prospects worked out.
Right. But we
Lewis
were
Brinson was like a top 40 prospect.
We were like wait, that's the next big guy,
Brinson, Asan Diaz, Jacob Yamamoto, and somebody else. Mm-hmm. But like that was at the time that was looked at. And remember when they traded for Yelich, like Yelich wasn't the Yelich he was in 2018, 2019. He was like a
20 home run kind of guy.
But like the Brewers saw that there was more there,
right?
And obviously that investment, that they were right,
yeah.
But I could be talked into maybe 2018 because those were two, and I guess in two ways, not just with the prospect capital they gave up to Yelich, but the fact that that's the biggest free agent contract the Brewers have given out, right? Lorenzo Cain.
I think so.
I believe so.
Yeah.
And they did that, like at the same time.
Day. Yeah.
When you do it at the same time, it really kind of speaks to like it feels all in-y.
Right, and that was also the time too, because Lewis Brinson was there, Brett Phillips I think was still, kind of.
And but when you because I feel like when you say all in, the connotation is like, okay, you're emptying your farm system. Yeah, but you don't necessarily have to. Like all in could be like we're making a big push. That's how I view it being all in. Like we're making a big push at this. But you don't have to necessarily trade every prospect that you have that's worth anything.
Right. No, I would agree with that.
So. I could be talked into 2018.
Yeah, because I just remember being on the next morning and just the excitement level from Brewers fans was just like, holy cow, who is this team?
Yeah, they're actually doing this.
Right. And so I would put those three.
I think that's fair.
18 and 11 along with.
I think that's fair.
I mean, okay, pump the brakes, full throttle. Were they more in pushing to go all in those years than in 08 when they traded for CC?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Because, again, maybe it's just my feeling. I don't know what their feelings were. Did they feel like they had a World Series caliber team with CC?
The thing that's always going to bug me about 2008 is Ben Sheets getting hurt at the end of the regular season.
Yeah.
Because if you go into the playoffs with a rotation of...
You had Gallardo coming back.
You had Sheets, Gallardo,
CC.
Sabathia.
Dave Bush won our only game that series.
He did. And remember, if you're going with a 4, maybe that means Suppan doesn't start that last game. But still, I mean... They were still down 2-1 at that point, so it wasn't all his fault. But it would have been nice to have Ben Sheets start one of those 2 games in Philly.
Yeah.
But I just the CC Sabathia thing is going to always be legendary, obviously because of how he pitched.
Yeah. I mean, they rode his back and he carried them.
Right.
I mean, you could say he was an MVP for the National League that year.
Right.
But
that's
how I define MVPs.
I think you can view all in different ways.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree, and I think it's dependent on what is your definition of quote-unquote all in. Are you looking at like going all in by the trade deadline? Are you going all in at just off? Yeah, there's different examples of all that. So I definitely, for me, I would put 18. I mean, if we want to go back further, couldn't I know this wasn't part of the question, but getting Raleigh Fingers.
Yeah.
When they acquired him.
The Ted Simmons deal.
Yeah. Kind of going all in for something like that too. So, but pump the brakes full throttle since we're on Brewers. Should they be aggressive at the trade deadline, considering what you've seen so far in this month of June? Right now,
as we stand right now, yeah. I mean, I will full throttle that, but obviously with the caveat of not being dumb, not just emptying the farm system because.
I just I think that is such a phrase now that a lot of people use. Well, trade and go all in, but the Brewers, I think, and I'm coming around on this over the last few years. That's just not smart business from a small market team like the Brewers, right?
Right.
You can't unload your entire farm. And try. I mean, even look at the Yankees just a few years ago when they were they did that, but it took a while for them to get back up there.
Well, it's like if you're fishing in a lake, you're not gonna fish all the fish out of a lake in a day. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure you can keep going back to the lake. There's some days, hey, I'm throwing a party, I need a couple more fish. Okay, but you're not gonna just okay, I'm gonna be out here as long as I can and get everything I can. It's you can't do it because it's that's how a smaller market team has to survive. Mm-hmm. It has to survive with developing its talent. Mm-hmm. And now we're in that window where they really have.
Yeah.
Times, in the 21st century when the Brewers have struggled, you go back to even the mid 2000s, Lucroy. The big struggle there was pitching.
Yeah.
They went from a stretch from Ben Sheets to the Peralta, Burns, Woodruff, where the only other young starter they really developed was Giovanni Gallardo.
Yeah.
That was why they were stuck in in 2002 through 2016 ish, because they couldn't really develop young starters.
Yeah.
Some wasn't their fault. Jimmy Nelson hurting his shoulder, sliding back in the first base when it looked like he was developing an ace. That sucks. Taylor Youngman had a good year as a former first round pick, and then that was kind of it.
Don't be dissing that Chris Capuano.
Yeah, but Chris Capuano was 2000s.
Yeah, I know.
But you just.
But he was so banged up too. I mean,
right when his second go around with the team, I mean that was pretty much the end for him. They couldn't develop the pitching because they had Lucroy, they had Gomez became an all-star. You still had Braun in his prime. You had Bath. That was that stretch where the Brewers could hit. You had guys like Scooter Janators, Gene Segura that were doing good things. Mm-hmm. You just didn't have enough pitching to contend because you couldn't develop it. And they tried to get it in the. They tried to go out in fridge to get it, and they had to overpay for Kyle Oshie and Mike Garza.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I saw Garza got thrown out of a little league game. Did you see that?
I did.
9U or something like
Matt
that.
Garza not exactly running from the preconceived notions I think a lot of fans have had ahead of him over the years.
But I mean, wasn't it 1 year where Willie Peralta was the number one starter?
Right. Yeah. He started opening day. I was at that game.
Yeah, I mean, he threw hard, but.
Right, he just never developed. And because they couldn't develop that, you had to expect more of other guys. It's well, Willie Peralta's got to be an ace because we just don't got it. Mm-hmm. But he's not an ace. And he's not even it's not even the scenario right now of Freddie Peralta, where Freddie Peralta is probably not an ace, but he's a good number two pitcher.
Right.
Willie Peralta wasn't even that.
Right.
And that's not his fault. That's just the nature of the beast and how things were at that point.
Right. I mean, even that 2011 one outside of Greinke and Gallardo, you look at it was Randy Wolf, it was Chris Narveson.
Right, and it's crazy to look back at the 2011 team and say that they only had 6 starters.
Yeah.
Or 6 pitchers make starts.
Yeah.
You had, obviously, Greinke, Markham, Gallardo, Wolf, Narveson, and then Marco Estrada.
Oh, Marco. I forgot about Estrada.
Who made a couple. Yeah. I think that was at the start of the year when Greinke was still hurt.
Yeah. I forgot about Marco Estrada.
It's now you see, heck, there's weeks where the Brewers have 6 different people starting a week.
Yeah.
And now it's just times have changed, but yeah, you're right. It was, and you look at the Randy Wolf signing. It's they brought in Randy Wolf, but it's they didn't bring him in ultimately because he was going to be your number 2 pitcher. Mm-hmm. He was their 4,
right?
And as a 4, a guy that makes a start in that playoff series, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yep.